Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus. And today we're going to continue our team preview series for the upcoming basketball season, which is sneaking closer and closer and closer. And we brought in Brandon Baker, the Hoops director and writer over at overtimeheroics.net. You can give him a follow on Twitter at OTHArkansas, and you can follow many of his other Arkansas endeavors over at bestofarkansassports.com. Brandon, thank you so much for giving the podcast a few minutes. How's everything going over there?
Doing great, Gus. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, so thankful to chat some Hogs hoops, especially after a season where Arkansas revisited the college hoop holy land of the Sweet 16. So let's maybe start there and talk about a little bit of last season. All aboard the Must Bus. Last season the Razorbacks were back on the national college basketball landscape. Apologies to Bobby Portis and his ring with the Milwaukee Bucks. We followed Coach Musselman pretty closely over at Nevada. So we're very pleased to see him and his staff found further success in Fayetteville. Brandon, can you isolate a turning point or maybe that defining moment last season that really stamped and really put Arkansas back into the national conversation and talking points?
Yeah, sure. So early in the season, it kind of started a little rocky. When we started SEC play, I think there was 4 losses in 5 of the first games. And going into the Auburn game early in the year, the Hogs were down, double digits again early in the first half, but they managed to put it together and kind of start to figure things out a little bit in the second half of that Auburn game, and came away with what would be their first win on a 12-game SEC win streak. And so that game, I don't know, I can't point to the one adjustment that Coach Musselman made at halftime that sparked it, but that game, that second half, is really what started the streak to end the season that pushed them all the way really to the Elite Eight. So that game, I think, is what really started. I always say that just finding ways to win when things aren't always going your way is the most dangerous thing that a college basketball team can do. And that game is when this team started figuring out, how to win games, even though they were down. They kept losing other big games. So that was really the biggest turning point that I can point to last season.
Yeah, and similarly to Coach Muss's teams in Nevada, sometimes it might take a little time for all of those pieces to meld together. And, the one that he should have a patent on in college basketball is the whole transfer portal roller coaster. We adored Jaylin Tate last year and how crucial he was on both sides of the floor last season. Who do we need to know this season that's going to be new inside a Razorback uni, fresh off the transfer portal? This might take a little bit. And I guess the other part is, does that give freshmen chance more, any shot to find the floor?
Yeah, so the big names coming in through the transfer portal this year, Audis Toney from Pittsburgh and Stanley Amude from South Dakota. Those 2 guys are 6'6" forwards that are really what Muss is looking for in his system of positionless basketball. He's talked several times about how they can fill pretty much any hole, any need on the court in any lineup. So I would be surprised if they don't both start side by side together at the forward positions, and you'll see a lot of them in a lot of different situations this year. But I think those are 2 probably the most important transfers that we're bringing in right now. And then the third guy is Chris Likes, the little point guard from Miami. He's just such a dynamic scorer, and whether he starts or he kind of fills that 6-man offense role, it's going to be hard to keep him off the court with just how well he's proven to be a scorer in the past, in the ACC, and he's looked pretty good in our first couple exhibition games as well. Those 3 guys will definitely make up a vital part of the rotation. But then we've also got, 2 other guys coming in, Trey Wade from Wichita State and Jackson Robinson is a freshman coming over from Texas A&M. And both of these guys could also be in the rotation. So that's 5 out of your 9-10 guy rotation that is going to be transfers potentially. But definitely those first 3 are the biggest names that are going to make up the biggest impact this year.
Yeah, and it seems like Chris likes from Miami, if you can score at that size inside the ACC, then he shouldn't have any problem having that transfer over to the SEC and really be impactful, whether it be in spurts or whether it be in a starting role, like you mentioned. I think he'd be pretty amenable to either role that he's going to play on a successful team if he's going to buy in. Like, Coach Muss is so great at having all of those different pieces buy into the one singular goal. Brandon, let's talk a little bit about the returning core. How much will the coaching staff lean on those vets in the backcourt? We love Devo Davis, JT Note. We love having, of course, March success usually is, a result of having some veteran leadership in the backcourt. You have that. And how about those returning bigs that are impactful? Conor Vanover, who might be unicorn-ish or something of that nature. And then Jalen Williams, who we know can get some work done inside.
Yeah, for sure. Devo Davis is, become an instant fan favorite over in Arkansas, the fan base, but he's going to play a huge part on this team. I think that they're going to lean a lot more heavy on him to take a lot of the ball handling duties and run a lot of pick and roll opportunities. So his improvement as a ball handler and as a passer, which he's got the skill set for, but how he can develop those things and maintain control of himself, will be telling to how successful this team can be, because last year he made incredible plays and had us on the edge of our seat watching him, but there were times that he could kind of get a little ahead of himself and get a little out of control. So I'm excited to see that development as he develops and gains more experience, because he is going to be leaned on a lot this year. And similarly with JD Note, he's started both of the exhibition games so far for the Hogs as their point guard. And last year, he kind of filled that six-man role. So it'll be interesting to see where Muss slots him into this rotation. But regardless, he's got the green light from everywhere. He's going to put up shots, and sometimes they don't fall, but he's hard to stop when they are falling. So both of those guys might be the two starting guards this year, but will definitely be the main two in our rotation and our game plan. Conor Vanover is interesting. He's hard to pin down because he's such a mismatch when he's got his confidence and his shot is falling. But he might be fighting for minutes a little bit this year with just the amount of talent that is also on the roster.
Right.
Last season, Musselman really went towards more of a small ball look and had Justin Smith playing a lot of center minutes down the stretch and a lot of tournament games. And so with Conor, he's, like I said, a mismatch, a great floor spacer. He's huge. He might have even grown an inch from last year. Rumor has it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him start some games. But he'll be fighting to stay on the court if he can continue to defend well and his shot is falling. He's a great asset to have. But I think the most important player on this year's team, probably the most irreplaceable player, will be Jalen Williams. From his talent standpoint, what he can do on the basketball court, but also as a vocal leader. He's really kind of emerged as, this team's anchor on defense, the guy that's calling out plays on offense. He's all over the place, and he's expanded his range a little bit, gotten a little bit more of a green light to let it fly. So his entire offensive skill set is very impressive for a 6'10" big man like he is. Being able to play in the post, being able to stretch the court, being able to pass the ball, and like I said, just kind of leading the team from a vocal standpoint. So I'm very, very excited to watch what Jalen Williams does this year.
He might be one of the more underrated players that is coming back inside the SEC because of the minutes and the dispersed playing time that Muss will have to put through because of all the talent, just like you mentioned, Brandon. Jaylin might be the one player that they can't take off the floor with all the other interchangeable pieces. So I want to see what expansion that you mentioned to his game that he's going to put on display. And then, thankfully, this is the type of insight that we're looking for, is who's going to be that locker room leader? Who's going to be the anchor on defense? And you illustrated that perfectly with Jaylin. I think Muss is going to take a little time to mend and patch together all of those transfers with those returning core. And, that's going to lead to success probably later on in the season. Let's dive into your conference, Brandon, the SEC. The conference is stacked with NBA-ish players everywhere, top 25 teams up and down, Final Four coaches on the sideline. Brandon, what matchup do you think might tell the truth about this Hogs team inside the SEC that might yield a similar type run that they made last year inside the SEC?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that they kind of had a rough go of things early in the season last year before they kind of got it figured out and meshed together. And I would not be surprised to see something very similar this year. They opened the SEC on the road at Mississippi State late in December, and I think that's probably going to be the biggest test of the season at that point. Mississippi State is always a tough team to play, and they're set to be middle of the pack or better in the SEC again this year. So that'll be a good telling point of where we're at. And then just a few games later, we're on the road at LSU, which again is always a good team, always gritty and tough to win in their home arena. So those two games are both come early in the season. So I think those will be major telling points, like you mentioned, to see where the Hogs are at that time. And maybe indicative of where they go. But if it's like last year, they might struggle through these games and use them as learning experiences, because then you look down the schedule a little bit, and I think in our last 5 to 6 games, you have a stretch where you have Bama on their home court and Kentucky on their home court. So those two are going to be huge games coming real close to March, right there in mid February. I think those two will probably be the biggest selling points of tournament success that late in the season. We'll really be able to get a good gauge on where the Hogs are at, on how much the transfers have meshed together, on how far they might be able to take it.
I totally agree, and I think I'm looking forward to the Jalen Williams and Garrison Brooks matchup with Mississippi State. I think those two have their skill sets are perhaps a little bit underrated everywhere. And Garrison Brooks is a new entity at Mississippi State. And I'm also looking forward to how all of those wings that you mentioned earlier match up with Darius Day from LSU, because it seems like Darius Day would almost fit perfectly in the fold into what Muss likes to do. And then Xavier Pinson, I really like from Missouri. So you want to see how your veteran guards match up with him. So yeah, those first 2 games right out of the bat in the SEC are going to be total tests.
Yep. Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's take a peek at the non-conference schedule. What games do we need to circle, highlight, underline, star on the calendar, make sure that we have our eyes on a TV set or a screen for the Razorbacks this season? And then, we want to see if these things are going to mesh, thrive, and fit together. So what non-conference game or two do you think we should just put our eyes on to take the temperature of this Arkansas basketball team?
Yeah, for sure. The thing that catches my eye first and foremost, the Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City, Missouri, late November, later this month. You've got Arkansas versus Kansas State and Cincinnati versus Illinois. And then, they'll play a championship game between those 4 teams. And all 4 of those are quality teams this year. They look to be pretty good. And Hog fans are really hoping for a matchup with Illinois in that championship game to really get a test, really get an opportunity for a quality win and a quality opponent. And, Illinois is probably going to be top 10, top 25 at that point in time if things go well in their season. So that Hall of Fame Classic, I'm really excited to see where we stack up with some really good teams in that weekend.
And then I think also that's going to be the perfect test to see how the roster makeup and the versatility that the coaching staff has with the roster makeup. Will we see a little bit more Vanover against Kofi Coburn? Who's going to try to contain Andre Curbelo and his wizardry with the ball in the backcourt? So yeah, if that matchup occurs, I'm definitely going to tune into that one, and I definitely want to see what coaching adjustments are made. With one of the biggest and one of the best players in the nation in Kofi Coburn.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's one reason I'm really hoping to see that game as well, because the Hogs have a lot of wings and a lot of forward talent, but they don't have somebody that's just proven to be their inside presence, dominant on both ends of the court the way that Kofi Coburn is, like you mentioned. So finding a way to negate his ability to match up with him is something that we're going to have to figure out later down the line regardless. So to have that opportunity this early in the season is fantastic for Muss and his game plan.
I agree that, even if that doesn't end in the result that Hog fans want, that's definitely going to go into the file for later on in March and help solve the puzzle later on when they run into that similar problem again, because as we know, many of the teams that are ranked inside the top 25 do hold that quality big, and especially a ton of those in the Big Ten. We're talking to Brandon Baker. He can be found over at overtimeheroics.net. You can give him a follow on Twitter at OTH Arkansas. And you can find many of his Arkansas basketball work over at thebestofarkansassports.com. Brandon, before we get you out of here, prediction time. Do we think that this Arkansas team is, Sweet 16, Elite 8 good again? Like, can we just run this back? What's the vibe? What's the feel? And just how successful will this Razorback roster be this upcoming season?
Well, it's hard to claim that you can run it back with such a high roster turnover like that when the rotation makeup is going to be, at least half of it is going to be different. But with the big names that are coming in through the transfer portal, it's hard not to say that they're going to be almost as good, if not better than they were last year, depending on how it all meshes together, of course. But with the talent, with the names that you've got coming in, with Musselman proving his ability to take the players he has and meld a game plan around them, I really think that we could be looking at another second weekend appearance in the tournament this year. That's what I'm hopeful for. That's my prediction, to get back to the Sweet 16. And at that point, anything can happen. You've got the best of the best in the tournament, best of the best left. So you get back there and see where you're at. Hope that you're hitting your stride at the right time. Anything can happen there. And it's also worth mentioning that you get back to a second weekend in the tournament this year, and Coach Musselman has got a top 2 recruiting class set to come in next year with 2 5-stars already committed. So you just kind of keep the train rolling and keep it going year after year like this. It's a fantastic start that he's on.
And it makes sense because Muss had a similar thing built maybe on a little smaller scale back in Nevada. So that it makes perfect sense that he's just translated that type of success to Arkansas and inside the SEC among, the best basketball conferences in the nation. Brandon, we just want to say a big thank you. Again, please give Brandon a follow over on Twitter at OTH Arkansas. And please follow his Arkansas hoop writing over at thebestofarkansassports.com. Brandon, thanks for a couple of minutes. It was really cool checking in with you, and thanks for educating the listeners out there.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me on, Gus. Thank you so much.
Of course, no problem, Brandon. Anytime. And if you like what you're listening to and you like all the kind, plugged in, intelligent guests, just like Brandon on the pod, give the podcast a follow over on Twitter at SDS Podcast. Efficiency of keystrokes, of course, and maybe even leave a kind review on your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. Season's creeping closer. Let's get it, people. Cheers. Cilantro. Gatulazia. Arigato.